After back-to-back weekends at the Apex, the UFC has finally hit the road and they're headed to Atlantic City, New Jersey, where they have Erin Blanchfield headlining against Fiorot in a #1 contenders fight for the women's flyweight title. This should be a very fun fight between a grappler and a striker, but also in the co-main event, we got Vicente Luque and Joaquin Buckley, which is surely to produce fireworks. There are a bunch of other fights sprinkled out throughout the card in terms of solid, entertaining, and high potential fights in terms of fight of the night candidates, so I'm very much looking forward to that. But the most important part is the fact that it's happening in front of a sold-out crowd in Atlantic City, as most people are really over the Apex, and me included at this point. As much as I enjoyed my time when I was present for one of those live Apex cards back in 2021, it does feel better from a live viewing experience when you're sitting at home and actually have a full crowd there, cheering, booing, whatever the hell it is. It's kind of better that way as well. Reminder, this is the quick picks version of the Atlantic City breakdown. So if you want the full card breakdown, make sure you check out the MMA Logcast, which I drop every Monday of fight week, breaking down the card roughly about an hour or so, going in depth with every matchup as much as I can to provide you guys as much information and analysis while providing my prediction as well. This podcast is strictly getting right to the point, why I think a certain fighter wins. But if you want to hear more in terms of why I picked a fighter, check out the MMA Logcast. Link for that is in the description below, or you can click the link at the top of my head here if you're watching this on the YouTube page. Quick programming note as well, something I just want to switch up in terms of the content. Normally I drop the free parlay Lucky Two-Step / Lucky Trinity segment for you guys on Thursdays, but what I'm going to be doing, since I drop 2 videos on Thursdays, which is normally this one and the free parlay, I'm actually going to make Thursdays solely for the Quick Picks podcast, and then on Fridays you'll get a double dose of content. At noon Eastern, the Lucky Two-Step / Lucky Trinity free parlay will drop for you guys. And then at 3 p.m. Eastern will be the 3 best prop bets for that UFC card as well. So minor adjustment, pushing the free parlay back 1 day. Again, if you guys want access to that nice and early, I drop that on the Patreon page where you guys are able to get it usually for a better number. But still, I drop it for free on Fridays starting this week. A reminder also this weekend, not just the UFC, but we got LFA, ACA, and Cage Warriors going down. So if you want breakdowns for those, you guys can check out the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Link for that in the description below if you want access to those written breakdowns for the full card for each one, if you guys want to check those out. All right, let's not waste any more time. I hope you're laced up and ready to go, because we're off and running with the first fight of the night between Angel Pacheco and Loughran. I really like Loughran in this spot, and even though Pacheco is not as bad as his Contender Series performance may have shown people, obviously he showcased a lot of good durability and heart and will, but I think Loughran is just a little bit more well-rounded here, and I think we'll see him successful in terms of bullying Pacheco up against the cage, eventually dragging him to the ground and grinding him out from that top position. Loughran has finished most of his matchups with the exception of one, but I expect Pacheco to showcase his will and durability once again, causing Loughran to have to grind this out over 15 minutes to get his hand raised on the scorecards. Next up, we got Andre Petroski going up against Jacob Malkoun, a matchup between two guys that primarily like to grapple, but I believe it's Malkoun with the better motor and the better gas tank, which should allow him to really push Petroski into deep water and really run away with it in the second and third rounds. Petroski will be dangerous early, don't get me wrong. He has some good power in his hands and a nasty choke game if Malkoun is not too it gets a little bit lazy with his takedown attempts, but I think Malkoun has showcased that he is a very solid grinder, and I expect him to put that on Petroski here to win this fight on the scorecards. Next up, we got Victoria Dudakova going up against Melissa Gatto. Very weird to see Dudakova as the underdog here, considering she's been a pretty big favorite in most of her matchups. But I think Gatto has the perfect aggressiveness to cause Dudakova issues here, allowing her to really touch up Dudakova and eventually sink into submission, as I think we'll see Dudakova go for some Hail Mary takedowns, maybe even land a takedown or two, but she will eventually get caught in something that Gatto will throw up here. I like Gatto and Gatto by submission. Next up, a rematch between Ibo Aslan and Anton Turkalj. When these guys initially met up 3.5 years ago, Aslan was laying an ass whooping down for about 6 minutes before Turkalj was able to take over as Aslan started to slow down and Turkalj was able to snatch up a rear naked choke. I still feel confident that this fight will end in the 1.5 round mark or under 1.5 rounds, and it'll likely be Aslan who's finally puts a stamp on this rivalry here and actually gets the first round knockout. I'm expecting him to be a little bit more disciplined and a little bit more patient than the first time we saw these guys throw down, and that should open up the finishing opportunity for him to win by knockout. Next up, we got Denis Buzukja going up against Connor Matthews. Buzukja is off onto a very rough run in the UFC, 0-2 through his first 2 performances, but I believe he's going to turn that around here against Matthews, who's a decent prospect in his own right. But I think Buzukja is a little bit more well-rounded, being the better combination striker, and his ability to implement the grappling approach when he needs to will allow him to really stifle Matthews' game, which is a lot of aggro, physical movements, big power in his hands, really muscles his takedown approaches, but I don't think he's ready for a guy who's experienced and well-rounded as Buzukja. Look for Buzukja to win this fight on the scorecards. Next up, we got Julio Arce going up against Herbert Burns. Both guys coming off extended layoffs here, but I think Arce is the one still with a higher ceiling of the two in this matchup. Obviously, you got Arce as a super chalky favorite, but what I'll be looking to hone in on will be the round 2 and round 3 props. As we know, Herbert Burns has an absolutely horrible gas tank. He even lost his last fight due to exhaustion, pretty much quitting inside the cage against Bill Algeo. Give me Julio Arce and Arce inside the distance. Next up, we got a solid matchup here between Verna Jandiroba and Lupita Godinez. I think the difference maker in this matchup is going to be Godinez's advantage in the wrestling realm, and that should allow her to keep this fight upright, where she should have a significant advantage in the striking realm. Look for Godinez to touch up Jandiroba on the feet. I wouldn't even be surprised if she started to mix in some takedowns in the second and third round as Jandiroba starts to be less of a threat off of her back. But I think Godinez's ability to control where this fight takes place will allow her to pretty much dictate the pace of this fight and allow her to get this win. I might take a small sprinkle on her to win by knockout, as I think that has some good value here considering the striking discrepancy, but I think that Godinez gets her hand raised regardless. Next up, we got Nate Landwehr going up against Jamal Emmers. Landwehr, always fun to put in front of a crowd considering the entertaining style that he brings to the table, but I think that Jamal Emmers is just too good for him in this spot. Look for Emmers to utilize his speed and footwork advantage to touch up Nate Landwehr, but eventually start going to his wrestling to keep Landwehr on the mat and try to grind him out. Landwehr is going to make it very difficult for Emmers, but I still think that Emmers is totally way more skilled all around and is too talented to get caught in anything that Landwehr will be throwing at him. Give me Emmers and Emmers to win this fight on the scorecards. Next up, we got Chidi Njokuani going back down to welterweight for the first time in a long time. He's going up against Rhys McKee here, and this is a matchup between two strikers. Although I do believe Njokuani is the tighter and crisper striker of the two, I expect his speed and explosiveness to be the difference maker here to really catch McKee down the pipe and possibly even knock him out in the spot. If this fight goes into deep waters, McKee has all the tools to really drag Njokuani into deep waters and drown him, but I don't think that we'll end up seeing that spot, as Njokuani will have major success in the early going here and eventually find that knockout victory. Next up, we got Bill Algeo going up against Kyle Nelson. Nelson's on a little bit of a solid run after it looked like his UFC career was coming to a close at the beginning of 2023, but I think he's in for a rough night here against Bill Algeo, who is the better fighter overall. Look for the unorthodox style of Algeo, his kicks from distance, and his 1-2s down the pipe to really cause Nelson issues, but it's really going to be the footwork and movement of Algeo that will fuel the rest of his game. Look for Algeo to touch up Nelson, maybe finish him in the third round, but I do think that Algeo does enough here with his body of work to get this fight on the scorecards. Next up, we got Nursultan Ruziboev going up against Cedric Dumas. There's a lot of talk on this fighter, specifically whether Ruziboev deserves to be such a big favorite or not. He is very dangerous. He's very aggressive, as he showed in his UFC debut, and I think he's going to cause Dumas some troubles here, who may not be able to get his takedown going and eventually find himself in a submission or a TKO position. I do like Ruziboev here. I do think the line is a little bit wide, but I still think he gets it done inside the distance. Next up, we got former middleweight champion Chris Weidman taking on Bruno Silva. very binary fight here. Weidman looking to get his wrestling going. Bruno Silva looking to stop that wrestling and land the hammer here. I'm not big on taking a guy at heavy chalk like Bruno Silva, especially with his one path to victory, which is the knockout. Obviously, the minute winning success will likely go to Chris Weidman here, but I do not believe in his durability or chin against a guy who punches as hard as Silva. So look for Silva to go out there and find the knockout. I'm not sure at what point in this matchup, but I do think that Silva finds the knockout. Next up, co-main event time. Vicente Luque going up against Joaquin Buckley. Very fun fight here, which is sure to produce fireworks, but I do think that we'll see Luque start to rely on his grappling like he did in his last matchup against Rafael Dos Anjos. I think Buckley may be able to showcase good takedown defense in the first round to round and a half, but as Luque starts to set up his takedowns a little bit better behind his combination striking, he should be able to open up those takedowns and eventually sink in a choke here against Buckley. Look for that patented Dar/Anaconda series from Luque, and I think he eventually ties Buckley up in something and submits him. And moving on to the main event, a fight that I'm very intrigued by. We got Blanchfield going up against Fiorot, grappler, Blanchfield, striker, Fiorot, and I've talked at length about this matchup. Very intriguing fight, but it's going to come down to the little details in terms of who ends up winning this matchup. And for me, it's going to be Fiorot's ability to continue her lateral movement as well as nullify the amount of control time Blanchfield will be able to get against the cage, and the fact that she'll be able to continuously move laterally will make it hard for Blanchfield to close the distance without eating too much damage while she's entering that pocket range. I fully expect Fiorot to stay on her bicycle and make Blanchfield pay anytime she tries to close the range, and I think that we'll see Fiorot do that solidly and consistently over the course of 5 rounds to win this fight on the scorecards. There you guys go. Quick picks for UFC Atlantic City. Again, I just briefly went over every single matchup. If you are looking for in-depth breakdowns, especially for that main event, which I went about 8 to 9 minutes on the main MMA Logcast episode, make sure you guys check that out so you guys can hear the technical breakdown I have for that matchup that makes me believe that Fiorot will end up on the winning end here. Again, LFA, ACA, and Cage Wars going down this weekend. If you're looking for breakdowns for those, check out the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow for the Locky 2-step free parlay as well as the 3 best prop bets. See you then.